When I first started writing the script, I saw Obsession 2 weeks ago, and I saw Backrooms the night before. I'm still obsessed with Obsession. Meanwhile, Backrooms has gone to the back of my mind. These two films simultaneously have had the number 1 and 2 spots at the box office, which is the first time this century that 2 independent films have had the number 1 and 2 spots. Which is crazy, not only because it is the summer, the time for blockbusters and huge Hollywood hits, but there is also a Star Wars movie out right now. That's just one of the many similarities that these two films have. And of course, I'm just one of many people who, subconsciously or not, have been comparing these two films, and I'm gonna put them head to head in this video. But first, I'm gonna evaluate them on their own merits and demerits before I take a look at how they directly compare and how their discourse has affected each other and their success. Spoilers for both ahead. Obsession. Directed by this dude.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Obsession was made with a $750,000 budget and has already made over $100 million. This film takes the simple and timeless story of the monkey's paw or a wish has gone wrong, but it smartly subverts the structure in many ways and mainly makes the horror about the victim of the wish while making the wisher the true evil in the story. While usually the person who casts the wish in the first place is usually a flawed person, you're still rooting for them for the most part, and they're not usually the villain. But Bear truly represents the evil in the film, not because he made the wish in the first place, but because of how he handles it afterwards. Usually the structure of these stories is a character makes a wish, everything starts off well, and then they slowly regret it and they wish that they hadn't made the wish in the first place. This leads to them trying to find ways to undo it, and most of the time it ends negatively for them, or they somehow fix everything by the end. While some of these story beats are still present, there are important distinctions that add to the disturbing nature of this film and changes that make it stand out in other monkey's paw stories. For example, on the literal first night that the wish is made, Bear can immediately tell that something is wrong, and that Nikki's acting strange, weird, and unlike herself at all. Beyond that, when he actually decides to do something about the wish being strange, he doesn't want to remove it, he doesn't want to revoke it, he doesn't even want to do anything about it really. He just wants to alter it slightly when he's on the phone. He kind of glosses over the fact that he took away his friend's free will. I absolutely love that the wish isn't inherently evil in itself like a monkey's paw story. It does exactly what you want, but it's really Bear's wish that is the true evil and what makes the horror of the film. This movie accomplishes the difficult task of making you feel insanely bad and remorseful about what in a traditional story would be viewed as the villain. We can tell that the wish can work out fine for regular people just based on the people who sell it. That guy seems like he's got it all figured out. Hell, Ian gets $1 billion, no snags or issues, just appears. Speaking of that moment, my biggest issue with the entire movie comes from that scene, and I haven't heard anybody talking about it. Makes me feel crazy, like I'm taking crazy pills.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
Bear tells him about how the wish works, he shows up to his place, and he uses the wish, and clearly sees that $1 billion has just appeared out of thin air. But for some reason, 10 minutes later, he shows up to Bear's door, knocking and saying, "Hey dude, it's real, I got $1 billion!" Like he knows. Of course he knows the wish is real. He told you about it. He was there. It just kind of felt like a lazy way to bring Ian into the climax and have him die unceremoniously. But hey, Nikki's goated on the sticks. Anyway, there's so many things to praise about this movie because I genuinely was sold on almost every aspect. The soundtrack and score are just phenomenal, and I've heard them on TikTok and social media a lot because it's resonated with so many people. The deep synths and the genuinely lovely sounds make for some really great tunes, especially moments in the earlier parts of the film where things are semi-normal, or that montage of them being in love. Let me add quotes to that, in love. Another more subtle aspect that I really appreciate is how you understand the 4 main characters based on very few scenes. For example, we only get one scene in which we see Nikki as her true self, not being affected by the wish at all. But just based on that one scene, we understand so much about her, enough to know that when the wish is in effect, she's completely different, which is also notable that it's the exact same night. I also love how all the characters besides Bear seem to know a lot more about Nikki and her personal life, such as her relationship with her father, showing that Bear doesn't really care about her as an individual, but more just wants someone like her to be in love with him. Speaking of Bear, there's so much subtle character moments that you may not notice right away, such as the prescription that he takes being his grandma's, and speaking of his grandma, he lives in his grandmother's house. and seemingly has not done anything to redecorate or make it his own, symbolically showing how he doesn't commit to anything, which is also proven many times throughout the film, such as when he tries to overdose on his grandma's medication and then chickens out last second. Okay, but let's get to the actual thing you're waiting for me to glaze. Or should I say person? Because Indy Neveready is on a whole nother level. She delivers a terrifying, empathetic, funny, yet disturbing performance that is up there with some of the greatest in all of horror. As the Academy has gotten more prone to nominating horror movies and actors within horror, I think this is really their opportunity to prove that they respect the genre and to make right not nominating performances such as Toni Collette's in Hereditary. Honestly, it makes me feel really bad for the actor for Bear because he's putting in an insanely good leading man performance that usually wouldn't be overshadowed by a supporting actress role like this. Michael Johnston does the nice guy character in a cool, subtle, not in-your-face way, which is also because the script is so good. There's never an in-your-face moment or line that's obvious what they're trying to do with his character, such as him saying, "Guys like me," or "Pretty girls like you never go for the nice guy," or just something so in your face and blatant that it would kind of ruin the point of the movie in my eyes. The closest thing to a line like that is the bedroom scene where Nikki is asleep so the real her that's underneath the wish demon can speak for the first time. And it has the most subtle yet disturbing line of the entire movie where Bear says, "Is it really that bad being with me?" Which comes after Nikki is pleading for her life to be ended, for her to be put out of her misery, but yet he still makes it about himself. Another underrated aspect of the film that likely comes from Curry Baker's YouTube background is that the movie is actually very funny. Because of the success of the film, it's not hard to find a packed theater, and hearing everybody gasping and laughing all at the same time was just electric, and not every theater experience is like that. I truly had a great time with this film and am super happy about the moment it is having. I strongly recommend it and would give it a high 8 out of 10. The Backrooms is a concept that's always resonated with me and clearly others around my age. I grew up in an era of Uncanny Valley and freak YouTube analog horror, and getting to see it on the big screen is surreal. While I've only seen one of Kane Parsons' original short films to do with the Backrooms, I was still hyped as hell to see pretty much Severance but filmed in Mexico. And as soon as I saw the first 10 minutes of this film, which is pretty much just a Kane Parsons short film, just like the ones on his channel, I was not only instantly sold, but understood why and was relieved that he was chosen to direct. This scene and the other found footage moment are clearly the highlights of the film for me, and it does make me wish they leaned a little bit more into it. Not saying it had to be an entirely found footage movie like Paranormal Activity, because I think that would have discredited some of Kane Parsons' amazing shots and style outside of those moments. I mean, that man can really direct. I can't believe I'm older than him. That feels weird to me. But maybe one or two more instances that included a handheld camera could have gone a long way. The tension and fear in these scenes is just unmatched, kind of for the rest of the movie. And the first-person perspective really makes you feel like you're in the driver's seat and your vision is constantly checking every corner to make sure nothing is there. Getting to the main plot of the story, we have two primary characters, Clark and his therapist. I do not remember her name, and I could look it up, but this also just goes to show, I wrote this script the day after I saw it and couldn't remember her name. Okay, looking it up, her name is Mary. Anyway, there's a common theme in this movie to do with both of them having PTSD and trauma that is manifested in the Backrooms. Well, to be honest, I think this is a little undercooked of an idea within the film, and it really could have been elaborated on or done much better, in my opinion. I also find it funny that the main character of the film is an alcoholic when the director can't even legally drink. I want to start with more of the positive aspects before I get into my real criticisms. These two actors give it their all and really put it all out there on display, doing the most with what they're given. For example, even though I don't buy Clark's eventual turn into insanity, I definitely buy the actor's performance. Another aspect I obviously loved was the set design. I mean, come on, if the set design of the Backrooms movie is bad, then the whole movie was trash. But no, they knock it out of the park and nail that eerie, unsettling feeling that the set should have. And it's not just the upper levels of the basic office building looking backrooms that are done well. We also get to see cool scenes of pretty much every type of room you'd want to see in a Backrooms movie. The sound design is also very strong and adds to the uneasy feeling of the film. My biggest criticism of the movie really boils down to the writing. And I think that's in large part because it was written by two randoms and not Kane, even though I'm sure he had a say in the writing for the film. Now, I was not there for the behind-the-scenes process. I don't know what went into making the script, but it feels very half-baked in what they were trying to accomplish, and like it maybe could have used an extra 10 minutes of film. Like I kind of hinted on earlier, the characters are very one-note, and they have themes and ideas that don't really get expanded in a complete and satisfying way. They also don't act like regular people, and I know it's a cliche in horror movies for people to make irrational decisions and to go down hallways they shouldn't for the sake of the plot, but there are so many moments where either Clark or Mary just keep going down deeper into the back rooms when it really makes no sense for them to. Like Clark sees on his first time going in there that there is something down there with him that is dangerous. But instead, off-screen, he makes a map of it and explores it all to his heart's content. We don't see any of that progress. And then when Mary finally shows up to the store and investigates the back rooms, she has no right going in deeper on her own instead of just immediately calling the police and telling them, hey, there's a crazy infinite expanse at the bottom of this department store that my client warned me about and he's been missing for a while. Could you investigate it? Like, I understand she's a good therapist, I guess, but this is beyond her pay grade. Like, this moment in the trailer made me think that there was going to be some more added context and elusive lore of her being drawn into the back rooms. But no, we pretty much have the exact same context that we do in the trailer when I first saw it. But in large part, the script is really trying to do its own thing while wanting to include some of Kane's original shorts lore, such as the Async company, but then also changing things about the lore and just kind of throwing Async in there in the end. I think for a lot of people, myself included, it kind of left us scratching our heads when it came to the company itself and the fact that the last scene of the movie is so Async focused. I really do feel like it left a bad taste in people's mouths. I really love the idea of the backrooms being a physical embodiment of someone's mental state. However, not only is that not really fully expanded upon if that's what they're trying to accomplish, it also just makes me wish we could get a good Silent Hill movie, for God's sake. I mean, that dinner scene with Clark kind of accepting his flaws made me really think of Silent Hill. I was left with questions that, if made more clear, would help with the story itself, such as how long was Clark stuck down there, or why was there an entrance in his store to begin with? While I did enjoy my time with the movie, I did leave feeling slightly empty and underwhelmed on what I could imagine a really good Backrooms movie being like. So overall, I'd give this film a low 6 out of 10. Now that you understand how I feel about these two movies in a vacuum, let me begin the head-to-head and kind of compare where the strengths and weaknesses lie and how their discourse has affected each other. Also, if you watched those two reviews and liked what I had to say, or maybe just disagreed with what I had to say, please, I'd love to talk about the films in the comments. If you like Backrooms a lot more than me, tell me why. And go ahead and subscribe and like while you're down there if you feel like it. Timing is very key when looking at these two movies' box office numbers. Obsession's success was unprecedented and is the first movie to steadily make more money after opening weekend since E.T. E-fucking-T. It has made more money on its third weekend than it did in its first or its second. That is absolutely insane. Just in case you're unaware, for a movie to be successfully performing the box office, if it makes 30% less than it did in the second weekend, that is still a success. So any producers on Obsession made their money back like they just invested in Nvidia in 2004. That just goes to show the word of mouth about this film, how it consistently has made more money week to week. The world has really loved it, and I'm of the belief that Backroom rode that high into its opening weekend as well. However, this timing is a blessing and a curse for Backrooms, and I'm not trying to discredit its success either. Given both films are debut features from small directors who started on YouTube, people were clamoring for another film that captures that same magic as Obsession, so the box office did insanely well, and people came to see Backrooms in droves. However, those are high expectations for a large chunk of the general audience to have. And speaking for myself, Backrooms couldn't really stack up to those expectations. Now, yes, these films should be evaluated on their own because they are different. But it would be foolish not to acknowledge the similarities that they do have. And honestly, that has affected the world and how they view these two films, subconsciously or not. But this is why I started the video with an individual analysis of either film, just so I could look at them outside of the context of each other. The discourse around Backrooms has unfortunately consisted of a lot of, it was good, but not as good as Obsession. And there's just been constant comparison, like it or not. Because of that, I would argue that Backrooms would be better received overall if it wasn't coming off the heels of Obsession. But enough really about the discourse, let me talk about me and how I feel about these two movies comparatively. To be honest, I think I did find Backrooms scarier overall and tense in the moment while I was sitting in that theater, but it didn't stick with me at all. With Obsession, I was left feeling much more disturbed, upset, and disgusted by the movie. Of course, in a good way. I was left thinking about what does Nikki do from there, how that whole experience affected her. I was left wondering where she was when we heard her screaming on the phone, or what exactly she was experiencing while she was under the effects of the wish. The open-ended questions of Obsession leave you filling in the blanks and discovering more aspects of the film that haunt you long past the credits. While on the other hand, Backrooms gave me a lot of answers that made me feel much more safer and not scared, such as knowing everything to do with the still lives and how the different levels work. Like when the still lives first show up in the Christmas tree room, that is terrifying. But knowing that they're just emotionless, nothing beings that aren't scary by the time we get to the dinner scene makes me look at that scene differently on rewatch. Another point I can give to both of these movies is how they resonated with their audience, but for very different reasons. I mentioned in the beginning of my Backrooms review that I grew up watching weird internet horror like Kane Parsons, and the generation that grew up watching these type of uncanny valley horror videos are now the ones going to theaters, or even in the case of this movie, making the film. I don't think I'm alone in wanting to see more swings at an analog type of horror for feature-length film, even though they may come off as a riskier move to studios. However, I hope that this film shows executives that those risks can really pay off. And hey, Kane has already signed on to do a Backrooms 2, which is just insane, and I'm super happy for the guy. Looking at Obsession, what really connects with the audience is how it tackles the topic of the quote-unquote male loneliness epidemic, which is a hot topic commodity when it comes to the internet discourse. Beyond that, it's really resonated with a lot of women and people who've been in abusive relationships in the past. It's a fresh and not overdone look at evil men like Bear that don't come off as a threat, but it shows how inaction can still be evil or violent. And before I get any comments, do not say I look like Bear. I don't look like that guy. Also, raise your hand if you thought he looked like Charlie Kirk in a couple scenes. I'm just saying. The final aspect I'm going to look at for these two films is the characters. These films have a very small cast with really two main performances and a couple of side characters. For Backrooms, the main protagonist just didn't have the development I wanted to see from them. Clark ends up in a very different place by the end of the movie, besides just being, well, dead. But he also has a Jack Torrance shining moment where he just goes fucking crazy and accepts all of his flaws and how he doesn't want to change. But we don't get to see how he came to that point. You could just argue that he's been in the Backrooms for so long that of course he went crazy, but it's also very vague how long exactly he's been down there. We see some envelopes and mail stuck in the door for the department store when Mary comes to it, but we still don't know exactly how long he's been trapped down there, or even if he's really trapped at all. Maybe he just chooses to stay down there. Wouldn't that kind of fit where his character goes? But we don't get to know that for certain. With Mary, all of the interesting stuff comes from her backstory, but she really doesn't do much in the present day. However, with the backstory, it doesn't even come into play that much besides the general idea of her mom being a hoarder or keeping her stuck in a room, and then having a cement print of her hand that she uses to fight the monster at the end. Somehow in Obsession, I have much more understanding of Nikki as a character, even though she's only her true self in one scene. I understand Nikki way more than I understand Mary, even though we see her backstory in her past. We don't get anything like that with Nikki. By all means, it doesn't really make sense, but I think it really just comes down to the writing. Beyond the two main characters in Obsession, we also have two side characters that I understand very well, and I felt very empathetic and bad for, because even if they may have been flawed people, they were not deserving of the fate that they received. Besides maybe Ian, he's a little bit of a shithead. But with Backrooms, the closest thing we get to a supporting cast are these two co-workers that are really only in two scenes and immediately get slimed out. And we don't even get to see the kills. So there's really only one major death in this movie we get to see. Compare that one major death to the really major death in Obsession, even though we get to see three characters die in pretty terrible ways. In conclusion, though these are both very strong films, one is stronger to me. However, what they're doing for the film industry at this moment is undeniable. This is a great moment to be a horror fan, a YouTube fan, or just a general movie fan, because what this says about the film industry is huge. We are moving in another direction, and this moment will be talked about for a long time. The world is showing these big studios that we don't want franchise movie slop. We don't want sequels or rehashes of TV shows. We want original films from young filmmakers and fresh faces that got their start in very organic ways. YouTube creators going into the film industry is now becoming a new norm, and I'm absolutely here for it. YouTube itself has been an important part of our culture for a very long time, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. If anything, it's giving me more of a desire to make YouTube videos than I ever have before. Here as a 21-year-old, back when I dreamed about doing this when I was in elementary school. These filmmakers inspire me, and what they've done deserves all the praise and money that they're receiving. This success could not be going to more deserving individuals and more deserving ideas. I can't wait to see what these two filmmakers do in the future, and I'm excited for the precedent that it sets going forward. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say about these films. If you enjoyed hearing what I had to say and have any thoughts on it, please comment below, hit the like button, and please subscribe. It would mean so much to me. Thank you guys for watching, and stay obsessed.